Do you ever watch your television and think, this doesn't look much like the world on my doorstep? I know we're seeing the same thing with adverts, but it's definitely fed into the TV programs now that I don't think you or I really watch, except I still live with my family and they just stick it on in the background of dinner time, and I am subjected to all of the Boomer Truth regime broadcasts over the airways. Today we're going to look about how the media manufactures consent, particularly on the topic of migration, and the boogeyman of the far right. Ooh. And if you don't believe me when I say that television programs skew their content...
Is that who I think it is on the right-hand side of this image?
It is, but this has nothing to do with Ash Sarkar today.
Thank God.
They skew their content to misrepresent reality and gaslight you. This question time clip from a couple of weeks ago demonstrates just how they can pack the audience to make sure that the questions selected push a particular worldview. This just blew my eyebrows off my forehead. Let's play.
What is your experience with the NHS? Why are you asking it?
Well, I'm a junior doctor, so I'm working in the NHS. I've worked on the front line.
I'm also a junior doctor, and I live and work in Anna's old constituency.
So I'm an emergency nurse practitioner. I've only been qualified actually for 4 years.
Oh my goodness, it feels like our audience is full of people. I know it isn't, but I seem to have unerringly found you. Yes.
I've only...
Yes, one here in the glasses.
I worked in the NHS for 8 years as a registered nurse.
I'm currently a junior doctor as well. I'm working as a teaching fellow in one of the hospitals nearby.
Can I just... Everyone put their hands down. How many NHS workers are in this audience? Put your hands up. Right, well, I just seem to have found you all somewhere. But anyway, yes, okay, put your hands back up. You want to say something? Yes, man in the blue shirt.
So, those are all questions one after the other as well. Like, I edited out about 10 minutes of discussion between, but all of those questions were in succession. About a third of the audience there, conservatively estimated, were NHS workers. And they are selected because you have to put your profession in when you sign up to be on Question Time. So somewhere, there's probably a lobby of NHS workers that says it's a good idea to go on Question Time. Then in the BBC, they pick NHS workers, and then they get selected to ask their questions first, shoved to the front of the queue. It changes your perception as to what the public concern themselves with, the particular issues, and it's always the NHS never gets enough funding, we don't have enough migrant workers here,
there will be a lot of organisation of producers and behind the scenes people, like people just hands on set, going on behind what you see just on the screen to make sure that the right people ask the right questions. They will probably be screened as well before they go on to ask what kind of questions you're going to ask.
You always do, yes.
Because you're not going to want some crazy to get up and start yelling, I don't know, start asking questions about the Holocaust or something like that. You don't want them crazies getting in there.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's really funny as well, because Timothy Stanley joked, the state of the NHS in this country at the moment, the only place you can find a doctor is on Question Time, so it's kind of bitingly ironic. What we're concerning ourselves here is with the issue of representation. If you pay £5 a month, you'll be able to subscribe to lotuseaters.com and learn all about this topic when Carl and Bo went through Hannah Pitkin's book, The Concepts of Representation. What it is, representation in the political sense is acting in the interest of your constituents. So it's not necessarily that they have to look like you, but they're acting on your behalf. They listen to your concerns and they depict them accurately within the halls of power. But media representation, artistic representation, is meant to be the replication of something in reality, one step removed from reality, so we can play out our ideas and so our ideas die so that we don't have to. We can learn from media. But the only reason we can learn from media is if it some way communes with what is true, how people truly act. Now, I don't think this extends to the concepts of soaps these days. Harry, I'm conscripting you into my long arc on this channel of moaning at Coronation Street. I mean, go to the next.
Thankfully, I don't live with my parents, so I don't have to be put through Coronation Street, but I do live with my missus, so I am put through other terrible television.
Yeah, so linked in the description are the other couple of parts of when I've discussed this topic before, but this was the last one. What this storyline is the far-right grooming storyline. To catch you up to speed, a character called Griff...
Oh, those far-right grooming gangs. Is that what this episode is? The well-noted occurrence of far-right grooming gangs.
They actually did a grooming gang storyline once, and it was a white girl groomed by her white boyfriend and a police officer. Anyway,
many such cases.
So this storyline is ideological grooming. So there's a young lad who's got ADHD called
manufactured
Max.
Consent.
Exactly, and he lives with his stepdad. And what happens is he encounters a guy called Griff, who's a very compelling speaker who talks about
Did they really just call him Grift and then change one of the letters?
Yeah.
All
All
right.
sorts of conspiracy theories, which we couldn't say on YouTube, of course. And he talks badly about migration, using analogies like invading species with ecological metaphors. What ends up happening is Griff, even though he presents some actual fair concerns, like the NHS is overstressed, infrastructure's overstressed, there's cultural incompatibilities, he presents those concerns to the counsellor and says, you aren't listening, you're covering up, and I'm going to get arrested for my free speech. The night before...
Sounds pretty based.
Yeah, well, the night before, they've already poisoned the well because they had him beat up a migrant child, and then they have him bomb a curry van. So Max ends up turning him in and going astray from the far right. But in this particular video, that is in this that's in this last segment I did with Dan, go back please, John, which you can watch on Rumble because it wouldn't allow us to play it on YouTube or on our website. And if the clip we play in a second isn't up there, you can watch it on Rumble or on our website, of course. Max goes to David, well, now that Griff's in prison, he did make some good points. He was true. There are people that are trying to destroy Britain. There are people trying to destroy our statues. There is too much migration. And David shouts at him and hounds him down. So he drives his stepson away further into the far right. And it's culminated, if we go to the next one, in tonight. Well, not tonight. Last week's Coronation Street episode.
Tonight on Coronation Street.
Yeah, it's not Monday Night Raw. My bad.
Connor shows up for an all-round slobber knocker.
What happened is they recreated the Joe Cox murder. So there was a far-right terrorist.
Really?
Yeah, who live-streamed
This
the
seems in
stabbing.
very poor taste.
Yep, and Max was watching the live stream, and the guy was inspired by Max's YouTube videos made by Griff to go and stab a local counsellor while she's at a refugees welcome event. We're going to watch a clip. Again, if you don't see the clip here on YouTube because we have to edit it out, go and watch it on our Rumble channel or on our website, linked in the description. Let's play.
Seen a few of them go.
Where's the audio gone? Oh. Does the clip not have audio?
The clip does have audio, I don't know what's happened here.
Oh well. I'm sure it's just...
Right, so I'll describe it. Basically what happens is he walks into the refugees welcome event, he's live streaming, talking to the counsellor, and he's got a concealed knife the entire time. Max is watching all of this from on his phone at home, and eventually Max decides to try to alert the people.
Oh no, look, he's filming that. Oh, they're black people.
Essentially, he's walking towards her with a knife. The refugee child, who was beaten up prior, warns everyone, tries to get in the way. Yasmin, who helps run the curry house, gets stabbed, and then they all hold Blake down, who is the gentleman who has stabbed them. And when asked, why are you doing this, he shouts, "This is for England."
All right.
Doesn't represent reality all that well, I don't think.
Well, you see, I remember there was about a year and a bit ago, there was one event where a public event had a stabbing of a public figure in it, but the circumstances seem flipped almost.
We'll discuss that towards the end. So this is a recreation of the Joe Cox murder. For anyone who doesn't know, 53-year-old Thomas Mayer shot and stabbed the Labour MP in Birstall, West Yorkshire, on the 16th of June, a week before the Brexit vote, and shouted, "Britain first." But since, far-right doesn't really register on any global terrorism map, so I think this is trying to confect a consensus reality that keeps, obviously, you and I compliant with mass immigration, multiculturalism, and depreciating down our purchasing power and wages.
No, we can find the Global Terrorism Index, and it shows definitively that far-right terrorism is just basically not a thing anymore.
Yeah, well, it keeps us afraid of that by not noticing facts so that we don't push back on these policies which are making us poorer because we're too afraid of being called racist. Now, it does represent reality in part. Let's go to the next one, please. There was a teenager who was recently prosecuted for apparently inspiring the Buffalo shooting that happened a couple of years ago. So Daniel Harris, 19, from Derbyshire, posted videos which were shared by Peyton Gendron, who has admitted a supermarket shooting in Buffalo. God, the Independent doesn't read their copy, New York. And linked to Anderson Lee Aldrich, the only suspect in a shooting at a gay bar in Colorado, Manchester Crown Court heard. Referring to Gendron, who has pleaded guilty to murder and hate-motivated terrorism charges, the judge has said, "This indicates that at the very least the material you produced and published had some influence upon the young man. I know he was a similar age to you, who went out and shot 10 black people dead at a store in Buffalo." Harris, who was the teenager charged here, was found guilty following a trial of 5 counts of encouraging terrorism and 1 count of possession of material for terrorist purposes relating to a 3D printer he was trying to use to make firearm parts. The court heard his offences were carried out over a period of 14 months and began when Harris was 17. Judge Field said, "You were, throughout that time, a propagandist for an extremist right-wing ideology. You were in close with a bunch of other right-wing extremists online, and there can be little doubt that you shared ideas between you." The court heard the video he produced glorified mass murderers and encouraged others to emulate them by carrying out similar attacks. One video, called How to Achieve Victory, said there was a need for total extermination of subhumans once and for all. Harris had previous convictions, including the racially aggravated criminal damage of a memorial to George Floyd in Manchester.
Why does there need to be one of those in Manchester?
Because the capital "We Black" means an international ummah, which are aggrieved and it can beat us over the head no matter the cultural applicability. He was engaged with the de-radicalization program, but told the operative his behavior was a blip and denied having any interest in politics. At the time he made those claims, the court heard, he was creating a video homage to Thomas Mayer, who murdered MP Joe Cox. So Max in Coronation Street has also been charged with incitement to murder. So it's obvious they're trying to parallel the Joe Cox murder and this kid who is the Buffalo shooter by entangling him in a far-right, white supremacist web of conspiracies. Right?
I hate this. I hate this. Did this kid magically possess these people and force them to pull the trigger on anybody?
No.
He's from Derbyshire.
He said some very unsavoury things. Is he responsible for the man who went and shot 10 people just because that man watched his YouTube video?
Well, I need to know the context of how he said these statements anyway, because that could be like a cheeky little joke, like, "Oh, aren't I so edgy?"
I'm not gonna lend credence to the idea that it was a cheeky joke because I can't say either way. But did he go out and tell this specific person, this viewer, at this time and this place to do this thing, or did he issue a blanket statement of hatred that I would disagree with but not find necessarily criminally actionable? And was he actively building the 3D gun parts? This is a question I don't have answered. Or did he just have a 3D printer and they've connected it to the idea that he could be building gun parts? So,
either way, 19-year-old kids go in prison.
Exactly, and this is what they're linking the storyline to. But then we have a lot of other instances that don't quite line up with the reality that Coronation Street is trying to present to us. So this was the day after the Coronation Street episode aired that we just watched the clip from. A church worker was killed and a priest badly injured during a stabbing spree in at least 2 places of Christian worship in Algeria, southern Spain, which police are investigating as a terror attack. Diego Valencia, sacristan at the Church of Nuestra Señora de la Palma, was killed, while Antonio Rodriguez, priest at San Isidro Church, was last night in hospital seriously injured but stable, the town's mayor said in a post on Facebook. Police said last night that a suspect was in custody. 3 other people were also injured in the attacks, local media reported. According to police sources cited by the newspaper El País, the assailant is believed to be of Moroccan origin, though he was not carrying identity documents. So not a white supremacist attack. Seems to have been a hatred of Christianity and the Spanish by an immigrant. If we go to the next one.
Not the first time that Spain has experienced such a thing.
Same day as the Corrie episode aired, asylum seeker jailed for life for fatal stabbing of aspiring Marine. An Afghan asylum seeker who stabbed to death an aspiring Royal Marine has been jailed for life with a minimum sentence of 29 years. Thomas Roberts, 21, was stabbed to death by Lawanjin Al-Buzarahami. I can't pronounce that name and I don't particularly care, you're a scumbag. Also 21, keep that age in mind, who duped Border Force by posing as a 14-year-old boy during an argument over an e-scooter last year in Bournemouth. The stabber had posed as a young Afghan orphan in order to gain entry into the UK in 2019. But in reality, he was a 19-year-old man who was wanted by police in Serbia for shooting 2 people dead in an apartment over arguing over smuggling. Judge Paul Dugdale told Salisbury Crown Court, "I sentence on the basis that the stabber was at all times the aggressor that night and by his behaviour created a situation that led to Thomas Roberts' death. Over and above that, he was looking for trouble. On March 12th, you murdered Thomas Roberts, a man you had never met before. You spent 26 seconds of your life with him, at the end of which you stabbed him fatally twice to the chest with a large knife you routinely carried with you. You started the conflict, and throughout you were the threatening aggressor. In seconds, you took the life of a thoroughly decent man with a bright future who is loved greatly by so many people. Your momentary act of extreme senseless violence has left a family with a tragic loss that they will feel for the rest of their lives." Earlier, Mr. Roberts' father, Philip, described how his son's death had left a terrible void. Giving an victim impact statement, he said, "I miss him very much in so many ways. His struggle to get up at work for 5:30 a.m. I miss him fixing things at home. I miss all his friends coming to the house. I miss his lovely girlfriend coming to stay with him. Tommy is my only son. I always wanted a son, and he's been taken away from me, leaving a terrible void. I miss him every day, every hour, every minute. Now I ask that justice is served." This guy was a former drug dealer. He shot 2 people in Serbia. He exploited the asylum system pretending to be a 14-year-old. And he killed an upstanding man who was wanting to defend this country and had his whole life and a future wife ahead of him. And you're going to tell me that far-right terror is the major threat when we keep seeing, with the Reading stabbing, with the Manchester Arena bombing, with repeated attacks by people exploiting the asylum system from overseas, that far-right terror is the biggest threat? Really?
I don't know if you've seen it. I did see a clip going around on Twitter over the weekend of footage of a shooting that took place where it was some foreign immigrant Middle Eastern shooters come in, burst into this place, a bunch of people get under the tables, and the guy filming the video just casually, because you're in a very stressful situation, says something regarding the man being a word that I'm not allowed to say because we would get flagged for Islamophobia.
Right.
At which point, all of the people surrounding him, who, as far as I could tell, were all white English people, decided to scowl at him and tell him not to be Islamophobic.
I haven't seen that before, no.
It's astounding. It's astounding the level of cognitive dissonance that people will put them through. Same with Manchester Arena bombing, where Manchester turns around over the next week and says, oh, we don't look back in anger. I'm sorry, you've got every right to be angry. People died.
Exactly. Though we also have the right to be angry with the BBC. So ITV hosts Coronation Street, but the BBC also does soaps. They didn't run a story on it. This is a screenshot taken on the day by our social media manager, Daisy. If they've run a story since, then happy to be corrected. But at that time, they didn't run a story on it. What they did run a story on was Afghan professor. If they kill me, I won't stay silent. So they're still promoting the idea that Afghanistan is an intolerable hellhole, and we have to take every single person from Afghanistan over here because the Taliban is completely incompatible with Islam, of course.
And that's not true, because I'm sure at this point Callum would probably live in Afghanistan sooner than he'd stay here.
House prices and all that. So let's go to the next one. The reason he was able to exploit the asylum system by claiming to be a child is because children just go missing all the time from the asylum system. There was 200 young child asylum seekers that have gone missing recently. The missing youngsters include 1 girl and at least 13 children aged under the age of 16. The rest, we don't know if they were actually adults, but we're going to presume that these are all children. Responding to a question from the Liberal Democrat peer Paul Scriven, Lord Murray told the House that 88% of the missing children, 176, were of Albanian origin, and said the government hoped to phase out the use of hotels for children as soon as they can. There are 6 Home Office hotels for unaccompanied asylum seeker children, including one in Brighton, where 76 have gone missing. An investigation by the Observer newspaper cited child protection sources and a whistleblower working for the Home Office contractors, describing how youngsters were abducted off the street outside the Brighton hotel and bundled into cars. A councillor for nearby Hove says that more than 100 children have gone missing from a hotel housing asylum-seeking children in Hove. So this looks like a child trafficking gang being operated by the asylum system. Again, is white supremacist terrorism, anti-immigrant terrorism the main threat here? Or are these stabbings, these terrorist attacks, these murders, and these child trafficking efforts all being done off the back of an excessively compassionate and failing safeguarding system for asylum in the UK? It seems to me that it's eminently sensible that we shore this up. So, Chris Flipp, who's a Conservative MP, has said now that we need X-ray checks to be introduced because of this asylum stabber. He said the government would be quickly introducing X-ray and other scientific age checks to stop adult migrants claiming to be children to boost their asylum chances. At the moment, age assessments are done by social worker interviewers. What we need to introduce are scientific age assessment methods used in other European countries, including X-ray bones of the wrist. There's also Lee Anderson MP, who went down to the Calais border migrant camp and said he couldn't see a single child. So these are all the people that are waiting to jump in dinghies and come over here. So Care for Calais, which is the charity group here, are just enabling them to cross the channel and leech off the UK taxpayer when they don't have any more legitimate asylum claims than, well, plenty of people that come from Hong Kong, for example, that actually do have a legitimate asylum claim. And the last one that you've already alluded to, I can't wait for Coronation Street to run the storyline that involves a Muslim stabber for an MP or a politician, because we recently had the Sir David Amess murder by Ali Harbi Ali. So he was an Islamic State fanatic. He's been given a whole life sentence for murdering Sir David Amess MP in... Oh, where's the Essex town?
Wasn't
Southend.
he also the son of an ambassador?
Yes, he was. So Ali stabbed the Conservative MP for Southend West more than 20 times after tricking his way into a constituency surgery in Essex last year. Ali, from Kentish Town in North London, told the court he had plans to target various MPs, including Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. He told his trial he was motivated by a desire to seek revenge against MPs who had voted for airstrikes on Syria. So, I can't wait for Coronation Street to tell the truth about Islamic rape gangs, migrant terrorists, the excessive exploitation of the asylum system by people claiming to be children being snatched off the street by Albanian migrant gangs. But I won't hold my breath, because they're just keen on misrepresenting reality to keep you poor and indoctrinated.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the premium videos, this one on conceptions of political freedom. If you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.